Hey Piero, I think one of the things in your video which is really crucial that you just failed to do was to talk about agency. And I mean the video was on agency. You began it that way, but then you started talking about some kind of it was an abstract sort of formalized schema. You sort of in your mind's eye you even used the word visualize. You sort of hovered over with the bird's eye view this idea of D or the domain, which you call W, which I assume you mean world, like this circle, right? And then there's this smaller circle inside, which is P, and that's the person. And there's this line in between the two. That's a relationship between the two. That's sort of there's P, there's W, and then there's this relationship between the two, which is thinking activity, which is T. And then you say that T is a specific relationship between P and W, and that P, and then T has got his own unknown, I don't know what elements, which are I and O. And I'm really happy to see that. I'm really pleased to see that you are becoming more. You're at least on YouTube. You're sharing your ideas. You're more explicit, more well, maybe not well, but you're more thought out ideas, no matter how quickly and with uncharitably you present them and to your viewers. I don't know why you were speaking so quickly, and especially with all these letters. It was as if you weren't really committed to the ideas. So if you said them quickly, you wouldn't. No one could follow the ideas, and if they did, well, it would just seem so extemporaneous that you would not be held accountable for them or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the sense on agency, what we mean by agency, because that's, I think, crucial to the question of what is agency, right? It seems sensical. So I think it's important to distinguish, first of all, between an agent and agency. So I think what we mean by, I mean, they're not really separable, but they're distinguishable. So I think what we mean by agent is that it's, in some general sense, one way to characterize agent might be someone, in your case, your world, P, in the world, right, in W, who, I mean, I think that those are pretty good starting points. Who causes or is who engages with the world such that intentional action is the I guess I mean this is I don't know. I mean intentional comportment, intentional engagement with the world is. I mean, I don't want to say is produced. That sounds like a factory produces a product, and then you have the factory and then the product, and they're two different things. When in the world we're talking about agency, it's not. They're not separable at all like that. They might be distinguishable, but they're not separable. So that's one thing. Is I want to say that agent's one thing, agency is another, and I think agency you can't really legitimately talk about agency in a genuine sense unless you're talking about the agent who has a conscious. It's sort of dependent upon the consciousness of agency, right? So if we don't say that. It doesn't make sense to say that the agent is an agent and has agency unless they know they have at least a kind of implicit pre-reflective knowing where they where they intentionally cause, I guess you could say, something to happen, where they're motivated and they cause it at the same time. I guess you could say. Uh, if if you don't know that you've intentionally caused some action, then you aren't really the agent, right? So I think that's a good starting point, I think, initially. And I guess while I'm kind of being critical here and I don't think that you really addressed that question of what agency, what you meant by agency. And so really what we have here in your ontology is P, the person, W, the world, T, thinking, activity, or the way of thinking, which is a relationship between P and W, a specific relationship. And then, T has two components, I and O. And it's not really clear, where the input's coming from and where the output's going and what the relationship between those two and P and the other components, P and W are, which I think needs to be clarified. But so let's see, what did I write down here? Right. So you characterize it in terms of T, right? The relationship between the person and the world is a way of thought. Okay, but you never qualify what you mean by thought. I mean, you say that you say T is way of thought, and then you want to say that sensory motor movement, which I think is different than action, but whatever. Sensory motor movement, action, thought, such as like deliberation, memory, perceptions, which are both part of sensory motors, the perceptions, but you characterize as raw sense data and conceptually interpreted perception. So these are all lumped together, fine, but I think the input-output relationship is difficult, hard to swallow because of moods, and I'll discuss that later. But temporality makes things really difficult. Man, there's so much flooding into here that's sort of the water is just rising faster and faster here. You call it thought, but I don't think that. I mean, if we're going to talk about agency, which again I think you fell away from, I don't think that thought is what characterizes agency. I think the sense that this is my hand, so that there's a sense of ownership there, right? That's the one. That's different. Then the sense of agency is that ownership is that my hand is moving, so that someone could come, like say you could come up and you could shake my hand and I could just sort of passively let you do that. I mean, I would have a sense that it is my body that is in fact moving. I feel the movement, the proprioceptive and kinesthetic, sensations or feelings are there. I have an awareness of that. I think that's what really this is. This is an awareness of oneself, not only, so in the case of movement, that not only that it is my body, my arm, my arm is moving, but there's another component, which is that I am the one moving my arm. And that's what the sense of agency is. And I think that your entire account could be given, and you would never get to the sense of agency. You would be stuck at, I am here. Like at one point, at best, you say, I am P in W with T, but it's of course T that itself is generating this sense of ownership that is I who am in W, or the person who's in W, who is in the world. You say that at one point you say P, or you say T, and then you say something like, which is P in W includes a sense of, or P's relationship to W includes a sense of the performance of T. I don't know what you meant by this, if you meant to say it, if you realized that you were still talking about T at this time, but it seems like you have T, and T itself has a sense of itself having its own performance, itself performing for itself, given to itself in terms of itself, and I think that there's something okay about that. But I would like you to clarify about that, and clarify that notion. I don't think that thinking is the right way to thinking is thinking, and you could make that very general, but I don't think that thinking is intentionally directed about something usually. I mean, unless we're just going to totally make it devoid of all meaning. Awareness, self-awareness is what you want to talk about when you're talking about the elements of aware agency, right? So let's say not T, well, let's say A, because thinking is, it's difficult to say unconscious thinking. These all have lots of problems, but self-awareness is the way that the self is given to itself in a with a first-person perspective, first-personal mode of givenness. So there's the experience, and then there's the like let's say in the case of perception, there's a perception of, this bottle of Diet Coke, and then there's my experience too, which is there also, and I think it's separate, it's distinguishable, it's not separable, but you never have the experience without the perception, or the perception without the experience. So the perception is given through the experience, but perception is just one mode of intentional directedness, and it has worldly properties, and experience has experiential properties. Experience is the mode of givenness of what is given. So there's what is given, which is the bottle, and then there's the mode of givenness, which is, it's given in a first personal mode of givenness. So it is not only is there this Coke bottle, but I am the one who is experiencing this perception of the Coke bottle. So there's the object in the way that it's given, into subjectivity, and then there is the experience of the way that the object is given in subjectivity. So none of these things come out in your analysis, and I think that they're important for understanding agency, because not only, if I'm pushed, or let's say that I'm on or let's use if you use Aristotle's example from Nicomachean Ethics, of the person who is on a boat and they are blown at sea to a foreign country. They are what he calls hekusion, which means they're not culpable. That's an involuntary action. What he calls the arche, the principle, didn't come from the agent, but rather came from some accidental environmental factor that in which the agent, the person, is in a sort of passive relationship to it. Whereas when they're in an active relationship, they are the agent, and they're acting, or excuse me, they're acting hekusion. Whereas before, if it's the hurricane that blows me, it's blows me to some destination. I'm acting akusion, involuntarily. That's not exactly how I want to characterize it, but that's an example. I mean, I think that someone pushing me from behind, I have a sense that I am the one who is moving. But if I drop to the ground voluntarily in response to the situation, to W, that's not really thinking. That is a kind of engagement and coping with the situation without reflection. But it has an implicit kind of self-awareness in it. Not a reflective self-awareness, but an implicit pre-reflective self-awareness where I have an awareness of what's going on, and that it is I myself who am doing it. So my body can be moved, or there can be thoughts. In the case of like thought insertion in certain psychological illnesses, there can be these thoughts that come up, or voices in my head. Or it can be I am the one who is speaking. I am the one who's thinking. They are my thoughts, and they are my movements. And that's your P, W, T. That schema doesn't ever address the relation, doesn't ever get beyond, at best, it gets to sense of ownership. That, this such and such is happening. But it's never, I am the one who is perceiving such and such. It's just there's the perception of such and such. Okay, so those are big issues. A lot of more issues with, like I said, mood. What is T? I mean, there's some kind of transformation between I and O going on, but what is it? And the boundaries between I and O are unclear. O's, the T's O has to be the I for T itself later on, and because that comes with time, and there's succession of things, and you have the sense of, there's so much more, but I gotta go. Anyway, I'm glad that you at least